For this episode of Voices, just wanted to give you a trigger warning. This episode does involve losing a loved one, but I do think you will find it helpful. Voices, where we give a space for the marginalized to share their art, work, and most importantly, their voice. A space to breed inclusivity, dismantle this ugly thing we have called hate. A space where we have honest conversations with love, security, and hope that the world will one day be a more unified place. Welcome to Voices. Welcome to Voices. I'm Lexi Rosado. I'm with my amazing friend, Ayanna.
Hello.
The reason why you're on this episode of Voices is because you've been able to share your story with me, and I think it is filled with such hope in the midst of grief. So tell us a little bit about your story.
I am the parent of two children. I have an adult son, and I have a daughter. Her name is Demia Zoe. And so my son, as I mentioned, he's an adult doing his own thing, has his own set of challenges. And then I had Zoe, who has some medical challenges, who at 6 years old went to heaven. She passed and moved on. So at 6 years old, that's not a part of the story any mom wants to have. Walk us through that. So when I had Zoe was the answer to a dream. You know, I had always wanted a daughter. Didn't know that I had a daughter till I had her, to be honest. Yeah, I found out, they did a C-section. I asked the doctor, what did I have? And they were like, you have a girl. So it's like, you know, everything is wonderful. About 4 months old, I've noticed that she's jaundiced. And so I take her to the doctor. They want to run all these tests. They wanted to do this biopsy. I'm like, no, you don't get to cut on my kid. So they have to convince me to do the biopsy. And from there, they begin to understand that my daughter had, they were looking to see if her bile ducts were connected and this, that, and the other. And from there, they began to understand that they needed to do a liver transplant. So at 6 months old, they put in for her to put her on the transplant list. At 8 months old, she was transplanted at 8 months old. And then as time went on, they figured out that she had this rare diagnosis of this thing called progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis type 2, which is like, it's supposed to be like a really rare, I think 1 in every 50,000 kids in the world have this diagnosis. Every year was a challenge. I mean, she had weird challenges, like twice her salivary glands got infected. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And so they would send her home with IV antibiotics in her arm that I have to distribute. You know, she ended up having a port in her stomach, so I can flush her bile ducts, because even though she had the liver transplant, she began to have complications with the liver transplant. They thought, at some point, that she was gonna have a bout with cancer. And so every year we were having challenges and knocking them out the park. It's like things would happen, it's like we get over it, things will happen. And so we were always, so at age 6, she ended up with a situation where her blood wouldn't clot. And so for us, it's like, okay, challenges is what we do. So she went to the hospital, and you know, they let me know that they wanted to put a port in because her blood wouldn't clot. And she had had a port before, so that was no big deal for me. And I went, they told me that I signed the release for them to put the port in, and went downstairs to get lunch and heard my name over the intercom. And When I got back upstairs, I remember it being just frantic. Everybody's all over the place. And they're telling me she's gone into cardiac arrest. And so they're going crazy. I'm calling my pastor. Like, this is what they're saying. They're saying she's gone. So we prayed and she came back. And from that point, it was a 2.5 week, almost 3 week fight, because she would get better a little bit. She never recovered. She never gained consciousness, but they would say, this is the day she's gonna pass, and then she wouldn't. And this is the day she's gonna pass, and then she wouldn't. And she's not gonna breathe, and then the next day she would. You know, so it was this back and forth of, they thought she wasn't going to progress, and then she would progress. They thought she wasn't going to progress, and then she would progress. But as time went on, there did come a time when her organs began to shut down. And so October 8th, 2009, she passed. It's funny, I woke up that morning, and they came to get me. They said, she's getting ready to go. So when I came in, you know, the machine was going crazy. Everything was all over the place. And then about 10 minutes after that, everything just stopped and she passed. So
this isn't a story any parent wants to go through. Walk me through your grief process.
So grief is interesting because, you know, what I had to do, what I decided that day, I knew the potential of me being wiped out. So I decided that day this would not be something that wiped me out. But I had to walk through the process. And that process looks different for everybody. For me, I had to process that with God. It wasn't something I could ignore. You know, in the Black community, we got this thing where we just gotta be strong. I couldn't be strong. I couldn't use, you know, strength and just being strong to get through it. I had to connect to God to get through it. You know, I went through periods of time where I was mad at God. I grew up in my lifestyle was one that you don't get mad at God. So I had to process through that because I was definitely mad at God, you know, and walking through that process. But I learned really early on that I had to pursue healing. You know, healing was not going to just drop into my lap. I had to make a decision to do those things that would help me heal. You know, I had to go after, you know, healing. I had to do those things that would help me walk through that process and not walk through it perfectly. That's another thing I had to throw out the window. This idea that it's just going to be a perfect journey, no, it doesn't happen like that.
It's not linear, that's for sure.
No, grief is all over the place. But the best way I can describe it is there are days that I just had to crawl into God's lap. That's the best way. When I envision what it was like, some days I didn't have anything. I crawled into God's lap and was like, this is what I got to give you because I don't know what to do with it. But I definitely had to walk through the process and walk it out. It didn't just happen. It didn't just go away overnight.
So there are mile marker years, and this year would have been her 18th birthday. Tell me a little bit about coping with that.
So this year was really, really weird because I've had other milestones, and throughout the process, other milestones had been really tough. This one was not like that, you know, and it was like, there was this, I call it amazement, because I was just trying to figure out so many things. Like, she's 18. Who would she vote for? Would she want to vote? Where would she go to college? What kind of boys was she like? She's 18. And I've learned that what healing looks like is people think because you have an emotion that you haven't healed. And I had emotions, but I didn't have the pain that used to come with those emotions. And so it was like, you know, people say all the time, it's something you don't heal from. It's something you don't heal from. As if that's the one thing you can't heal from. You can heal from everything else but that. And it's funny because with her 18th birthday, it was the first time that I can say, wow, you know, I had 50 million questions. Did I cry? Yes, I cried. But it was the kind of cry that I would have had with her being here at 18 and me being like, oh my goodness, my baby's 18. You know, it wasn't, you know, and I'm not saying that people don't go through, everybody's not gonna handle 18 the same. But it was a big indication of how far I've come in the process of healing. So.
And so that's how you did your piece for us. What are things that people should not say to someone grieving? And what is a good thing to say?
Don't ever tell people that God needed a flower. Oh, goodness gracious. You know, the Lord needed a flower, so he just plucked my baby. Don't reduce my baby to a object. Don't tell people you should be over this by now. You know, talk about, most people want to talk about the person. Don't put them in a position where they can't talk about the person, because they need to be able to talk. They need to be able to talk. I need to be able to tell stories about my daughter. Some people are so careful that they tiptoe, and it's like, but I want to talk about her. You know, I want to talk about her. But I would say, find out how they feel about heaven. It's funny, you know, I had people would say, well, you know, at least she's in heaven. And I'm like, that's not making it better for me. You know, that doesn't do it for me. I would say, if you don't know what to say, don't say anything. If you don't know what to say, just sit there. Sometimes just sitting and being present is enough.
So in 2020, a lot of people lost loved ones, friends, family. What one piece of advice would you give to those who had loss or grief? Or a few pieces of advice.
So, number one, let yourself feel it. You know, a lot of times we want to deny feelings. We want to push it to the side. We want to be strong. If you're hurting, if you've lost your job, that hurts. If you've lost independence because you have to be quarantined away from everybody, that hurts. If you lost a loved one, that hurts. Let yourself process through that and walk it out. And if you need help, go get it. I pursued healing. Healing wasn't going to just fall in my lap. I had to understand that really, because I had a choice. Either I cannot get it. For me, it was, I could, if possible, I cannot get out this bed, you know. And so pursue healing, and healing is different for some people need a group, some people need therapy, some people need a trusted friend. But whatever pursuit that you need for you to be able to walk that healing out, do what you need to do, because it doesn't just fall on you. And time does not heal things. Time doesn't heal people. There's, like I said, I'm not saying 18 was wonderful. I don't know what 21 is going to be like. I'm expecting the best. However, and give yourself grace. At age 21, if I'm a wreck, because she's really, she's At 21, she'll be grown enough to drink. So my question would be, I wonder if she drink wine, you know? But give yourself grace. Be gentle to yourself. Be nice to yourself. You know, a loss is real and it hurts. You know, let yourself feel it and acknowledge it. This hurts, you know, so I would say acknowledge it, then do what it takes to not get stuck there. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your strength with us. And then now we get to see you do a lovely piece of a letter to your daughter. Thank you.
Hey, Zozo. Or have you decided that you like Demia better now? It does have somewhat of an original, unique feel to it. Girl, you are 18. You are legally grown here on earth. I often wonder, do you grow up in heaven? Will I get a chance to raise you, or will you give me a heavenly tour when I get there? Are you drawing up there? You were so artsy down here. I remember reading about mansions in heaven. You're probably up there decorating. I know you're being all kinds of imaginative and trying to boss people around. I wonder who you've met that knows me here. What words of advice would I have given you this year? About men? About college? Would you want to register to vote? I wonder who you would have voted for. I definitely would have let you be free in thought. But what issues would you take to heart? What concerns would you have fought for? I know you would have been expressive. You're not missing anything down here. They're down here cutting up. How tall are you now? Your illness made you a shorty, but you were so tall inside even here. I wonder in your heavenly glory, all healed and whole, how tall you are. What I wouldn't give to see the white of your eyes. They were yellow here because of your liver challenges. I bet they're so beautiful, just like you always were. I'm starting to lose the memory of your face. Thank God for pictures. But I can still imagine hearing your voice. And if I'm quiet enough, I hear you speak in the silence. I have kittens now. We never had pets when you were here. I almost wish we could have done that different, but when would we have had a time for a pet? The ants you kept feeding were your pets. These kittens have some character traits of you and your brother. Speaking of your brother is doing okay. He still has a hard time with you leaving. If you can make a prayer request in heaven, put one in for your big brother and your dad. Well, all of us. I mean, you do have Jesus at your fingertips. Well, you know, I can go on and on. We had that same character trait. But gonna close this letter to heaven. I miss you as much as my heart can handle. I promise to learn more about heaven this year so I can imagine you there. I'm not sure I'll be eating pancakes. Your mom is trying to eat healthy. Who am I kidding? I'll be celebrating your big day because you know birthdays mean everything to me. My love for you ranks right under God. My only little girl, my little princess, grown or not, always my baby girl. Tell Jesus I said, hey. See you later, alligator.
This episode of Voices has been brought to you by Mount Hope Church, Blue Owl Coffee, and Vision Success Marketing and Consulting.